Hello, my name is Olurotimi Osha. I like talking about American presidents, and I've been taking time just because of what I'm currently going through to also draw attention to color of law violations. That's deprivation of rights under color of law violations, pivoting on subordination of uh, perjury and fraud upon the court, superintended by a corrupt judge in Montgomery County, Maryland, Judge James A. Bonifant. Um, I love America, of course, if you, the way I study American presidents, and it's not something I just started, it's something that I'd been doing since I was a kid, right? And so in Nigeria, of course, I was fortunate to have the means to do it. Um, and I have a law degree. I'm not licensed to practice law. By the way, a disclaimer, all these things I've been discussing cases and just give, certain things regarding my own case and the law. But I'm not licensed to practice law, so I'm not giving any legal advice. I have to give that disclaimer. But I do have a Juris Doctor or Doctor of Law degree from George Washington University Law School, which is one of the better law schools in the United States. It's particularly an excellent law school in terms of government, if you're interested in government. And, it's right, here in Washington, D.C. Our neighbors are, the White House, right? The World Bank, IMF, of course, the Capitol Hill, that's Congress is right here in D.C. And of course, the Supreme Court as well is right here in DC. Well, look at me doing a plug for my alma mater. But it's kind of funny that nobody's come out to help me, despite of what I'm going through. So um, I'm going to just give an update. Today is February the 4th, 2026, and the last thing I discussed was about how I'd gone to court expressing concerns on February the 2nd, expressing concerns about, the apparent um, lack of representation or ineffectiveness of counsel of my public defender. My public defender went to an excellent law school, but, even though she's been there for 7 months, it appears that, she's allowing herself to be co opted by the state attorney's office. And, she had been very focused on trying to force me to accept a plea bargain. Of course, eventually she said, okay, we'd go to trial, but then she was now trying to um, present a case, a very one-sided, very elemental form of defense. That didn't provide a broad strategy to address all the issues. There are many different, um, there are many counts within the piled up cases and charges, and she didn't provide that broad scope. I've done videos talking about how the charges can be defended. There's one aspect that I agreed with, and that was all she was going with. That look, there's a second degree assault supposedly on police, but she said it doesn't meet the statutory elements of assault. And that's intent to frighten, because there's no battery, right? Even though they haven't, provided a bill of particulars, right, to state what type of assault, second degree assaults they're talking about, because they're different forms. Of course, there are cases in which, the state has said, the state of Maryland in particular, they're cases that I read, and they've argued, the state has argued that, well, that second degree assault is a unified crime, and the forms it can take, the modalities do not constitute separate crimes, right? They don't constitute individualized crimes. And so when jury instructions are given, that they don't have to uh, require unanimity in each form of the crime. For instance, some people can agree that it's intent to frighten. They can say it's intent to frighten, and some people can say there's a battery. And that so long as they all agree that there's some form of second degree assault, some form of assault has occurred, and so that was a reason to ask to specify a bill of particulars, um, asking what uh, form of defense, second degree assault, is the state um, you know charging, so that one can appropriately uh, provide the defense without being surprised in court. Of course, we've looked at the body cam, and yes, she says, look, there's no intent. They don't meet all the forms of second degree assault, because they can't even prove intent. There's no intent. There are ways to negate that intent, right? Intent, again, that's mens rea, right? Or apart from mens rea, there's also apart from mens rea, there's also the actus reus, which would be the threatening act, right? The threatening act, and then there's intent. She says, look, there's no intent, because intent can be negated through it was a mistake of fact. It's an accident. You think you're being punked. You think it's a joke. It's all a hoax, right? So there's no intent. You don't have no criminal intent there, and they can't prove that element, and so it won't be met. Of course, there's a last element of reasonable fear by the alleged victim, um, of imminent bodily harm, right? Reasonable apprehension by the victim of imminent body harm, right? Which didn't exist when you look at the video, but because it's subjective, even though it's reasonable, it's subjective. It's what the victim claims that they experienced. So, um, in any event, I didn't want her representation because it was one week and I was getting sort of a fire brigade last minute approach. There was no defense. There was no strategy at all, and it seemed like it was headed towards sabotaging my case, especially if she was trying to remove evidence, suppress evidence of the police misconduct. Right, the police committed perjuries all over the case. Right, all over the place. They're just perjuries. Or from the charge statement, it's a perjury. You look at the body cam, it's fabricated. On the day of my bond hearing, my first bond hearing on June 2nd, 2023, the police officer, Sergeant John King, he committed perjury. He just gave a fabrication. He said, I came out with a baseball bat, that they brought an EAP. It turns out there was no EAP. The EAP was still in the sheriff's office, so he lied. No baseball bat. So perjury, just all over the place. There's another police officer on the May 14th, when Jide Warere, who filed the perjured EAP, and my neighbor, who together, and one other man, and Jide Warere, they all came and assaulted me, manhandled me, attempting to kidnap me in my home, and they fabricated, their statements were fabricated. The police committed perjury again, because my friend spoke with the police and told the police that um, I had just been assaulted by my neighbor, but the police went to write a false incident report. So all of these perjuries, we're supposed to bring it up, but she's trying to hide it, and it's documented. These are documented things, and we see that's not what happened. She's not ordered the body cam that she said. Okay, she requested the body cam, the evidence from May 14th, but the state just outright refused to provide it. So that's suppression of evidence. It's a violation of what's called the Brady Doctrine, right? But the judge has not done anything to reprimand the state, and instead he's just what he was telling me was that, well, I'm very rigid. I'm very rigid. He doesn't know why I'm very rigid, and contemplating doing another competency evaluation, which is a form of witness tampering, because they're trying to discredit you as a witness and trying to force you, because it takes your rights. It's a violation of my 14th Amendment rights, right? Remember, I talked about what a 14th Amendment is again, due process, right? No state shall deprive any person of, you know, of their life, liberty, or property without due process of the law and equal protection of the law as well. Nor shall, nor shall it deny any person of the equal protections of the law. That's a 14th Amendment. It normally reflects like the Fifth Amendment. So that's due process. Again, that applies to the states, you know. But this is very, very important. Again, I love America. And as I read the history a lot, I'd read the history. I continue to read the history. I have a degree in the history. I have a degree specializing in American history. And from Columbia University, right? I have, and I continue to study on my own. But one is, and when one reads the history, you see there were terrible things that happened to a lot of people back then. But as I study law, in law school, what we do is it's sort of like history because we study cases, right? Previous cases, judicial decisions, and it's the process is called stare decisis. um, when I went to study at Oxford, I remember a tutor was emphasizing that it's actually supposed to be pronounced dikikis or something. Dikikis, stare dikikis, not decisis. But in America, we call it stare decisis. And so that's like, precedent. That's what we study. We study like the history, what came before. So that's like uh, a history class itself. And when I was studying those cases, and even when I continue to do that, one's full of admiration because it's like they're these judges and they're thinking, how do you preserve the Constitution and balance the uh, rights and liberties of citizens with, the functions and power of the government, and things like that in a well-ordered society. But one does not think that any of these judges is in any way dishonest, corrupt, right? I think that's anathema in our laws. But I'm actually in a courtroom experiencing a corrupt judge covering up and protecting police misconduct. Because what happened to me on May 16th and May 14th, 2023, the reason I'm in court is because of police misconduct, government, illegal government action, right? I was in my home, there was no arrest warrant, I wasn't committing any crime, and I was falsely imprisoned in my home, without probable cause. And then I was tasered and I was harmed. And then the people who injured me, I thought this was a hoax because again, I've done videos talking of what really happened, right? Um, in order to prevent me from filing lawsuits against them or for them or to prevent their criminal prosecution, this judge, the state of Maryland, filed charges impeding me, blocking me. And it's been 3 years. They've defamed me. They took away my job, my government job, taken everything away from me. And you know how when you have the cloud, the shadow, there's that cloud of almost, a charge is like a cloud of infamy, right? It makes you want to appear appropriate in their community, because when people think somebody's a bad person or they've been charged by the state, then they flee from them. They think they're a bad person, and especially rightly so for many immigrants, right? The immigrant community or minority communities, because they think, well, that the criminals, the state must be watching them, the government must be watching people that are criminals that have been charged. Um, uh, so they don't want to be framed. They don't want to be in circles or circumstances where they might be implicated or wrongly associated with their apparent or ostensible crimes, right? And I'm seeing from my experience that I was wrongly locked up by Judge Bonifant for 15 months, apart from being placed under house arrest for a year with a GPS on my ankle. I don't take welfare. I didn't come to America to take welfare. I'm an American citizen. And this guy, they wanted to dehumanize me and strip me of everything. And in court, he said it, I'll never forget, in October of 20, 2023. October 24th, 2023, he said he wanted me to lose my job at the Pentagon. How do it, especially for a black guy, who's worked very hard. Imagine all the time I spent in school. I have 16 years of university education, all the degrees I got. And my parents, my family would want me to now start, um, you know, getting the rewards or paying back the rewards of all the blessings, the support they gave me, right? Yes, but I came here to America alone, but I succeeded without parents or family alone because of the seeds, what my parents had done and my family had done for me in Nigeria, what my parents, the outstanding training that my family gave me when I was in Nigeria, the nurturing, right? And of course, I have a right to defend my name, my family name, my integrity, because an odious charge is defamatory. But you see this judge who doesn't care, who just has this criminal mind about him, and that's what I think it's part of what's shocking me, that we have judges who actually have criminal minds. They commit crime. What he's doing is illegal, right? Judicial misconduct is illegal, but he's covering it. The state is helping him cover it, and it makes you wonder how many of them do this, are responsible for judicial misconduct, prosecutorial misconduct. And you realize that those ones that make the news, and they're just scapegoating some people or whatever, they because this guy, they've been hiding it. My mom, people, we've tried to put it out there, and we see how corporate media is. And it's like they have a racket together. Corporate media doesn't care, or maybe corporate media just doesn't care about what's going on with black people until they get killed. You see the sort of attention George Floyd got when he was dead. Maybe because some money changes hands at that time, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that that appears to be the lot of black people in America. That's so unfortunate. But again, for me, that the fact that there's this abusive process and our legal system is just being abused by the people who are supposed to be custodians, represent it and protect it, like judges, prosecutors, like the cops, like Judge James Bonifant. I'm astonished. It is so painful. And so, you can imagine something that I spent all my life chasing, respecting. That's the American legal system. I finally did it right. I went to law school, graduated, and I'm seeing, wow, that judges like Judge James Bonifant who abuse it, right? They abuse the American legal system. They impugn it. I was telling him, I was defending my constitutional rights, telling him about my freedom of thought, conscience, opinion, beliefs, and my religion protected by the First Amendment. And he cackled. He cackled, saying, "Well, I think I have these constitutional rights, but he doesn't think I do." That's the Constitution, First Amendment, right? And I'm stunned. I even thought he would, the fact that it was written by a fellow Virginian, because I think, he grew up in Montgomery County, right? He was born and raised in Montgomery County, but I noticed he graduated from University of Virginia, right? And James Madison gave us the Bill of Rights. That's him, James Madison. And I quoted James Madison to him, and there was he thinking that my rigidity, because of that, it might be a form of mental illness. But he acknowledges, fortunately, the psychiatrists that he sent me to, which was very unusual, they did not buck, they did not bend, right? They didn't bend the knee, and they told him, and they wrote it twice, two different times, that no, that I have no mental illness, that Olurotimi Osha has no mental illness. They refused. He said he doesn't belong here. And he said it. He had to acknowledge it on February 2nd that these people said that my rigidity is not a mental illness, because he was angry and upset about my rigidity, that he does, that I'm very rigid, that I'm very rigid. What is rigidity? That we're Americans. That's I'm self-governing, right? That's my autonomy, right? That's my freedom of my thoughts, not to become coerced. That's the American Constitution. And he's saying, though, we don't have those rights. And I'm telling him, and it's like, oh, I think I have these rights. And the thing is, he doesn't think I do. He was so like, man, and he's a judge. And he's just protecting crooked cops. And that's what's called fraud upon the court, right? These cops have fabricated evidence, committed police misconduct. They went to someone's house, falsely imprisoned him, fabricated evidence, suborned perjury, and he's protecting them. Shot me, assaulted me, and then they said they were the victims, and he's protecting them. 3 years. Because if he's been now trying to coerce me, engage in witness tampering. And I reported this, and the Commission on Judicial Disabilities does nothing, because other judges, you wonder how many are like him. I started to check before all of this, in law school, because I went to a national law school, right? George Washington University. So they deal mostly with federal, right? Where you go to law school, not really with state law. Each state, has its own laws, but we deal normally with federal. So what the Supreme Court, or, federal circuit courts, federal district courts, what they say, what the Supreme Court says, what makes it to the Supreme Court mainly. Those are the cases we normally study. So I was often really more interested in Supreme Court judges. There was one time I always used to like follow them. I'd study all of them. What they say and everything. Right. I think since I came to the U.S., there's never been a time that I haven't known all the sitting Supreme Court justices. I wouldn't know their biography, right? So I study them. I'll tell you which is fun. So it shows that I love the law, I respect the law. So it's funny that, I'm being charged that I violated the law, but my rights are being violated. If somebody who has my education, if I can be gaslighted by the court of Judge James Bonifant, what have they been doing to high school dropouts? I see many of them in jail. So maybe many of them have been suborned, they've been tricked. In fact, I saw people who were coerced to taking plea bargains. They were coerced. They were coerced into taking medication that wasn't meant for them just because they wanted to carry on with their lives. And they tricked them. Once they take that plea bargain, they get into the cycle of, sometimes they'll give you probation for 3 years, 5 years, and so long. They get into that cycle of always coming back. And you're seeing bad judicial decisions that are actually against minorities in Maryland. And I guess I'll do subsequent videos just talking about this. But my experience, because again, I'm supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, and I'm entitled to my day in court. So let me talk more about the Sixth Amendment today. The Sixth Amendment protects my right to know my charges, right? To my right to a speedy and fair trial, an impartial jury. It gives me right to counsel, right? Right to counsel if I'm charged with a criminal offense. In all criminal, prosecutions, I have a right to effective counsel. If I'm indigent, the police. That means if I have experienced economic hardship and I can't afford an attorney, then the state has to pay for an attorney, right? What else about the Sixth Amendment? The right to cross-examine my accusers, right? Whoever accuses me, I have a right to examine them. I have a right to obtain witnesses in my defense through, compulsion. A compulsory means that's a subpoena. So the court will subpoena. A subpoena is commanding witnesses to come, so they can come and testify on my behalf in court under oath. All of these things, my public defender did not do. A week to court, I given her a list. She never subpoenaed them, right? witnesses to come. She didn't do that. Just a week away, right? I had said, okay, they need to provide because I need to. I have to be able to cross-examine the people who lied. Jide Wari, the Gurma Shumi, who ex parte fabricated petitions which got ex parte orders. I never appeared in front of a judge. Those are violations, and they're from civil cases. These are illegal things, and I'm saying these are mechanisms, these are machinations that go on against marginalized communities in Montgomery County, in Maryland, and it is so sad, you know. So it gives you a different perspective, a way to look at things. Just it could not have been more than a week before I was assaulted on May 16, 2023. One of my closest childhood, very close friends, he's a very old friend, very good friend since, my teens, right? I'm not teens anymore. He turns out, a lot of people, he's in America as well. He's in another state. He's married, he has kids. And we still talk. I'm that sort of person that my old friends are still my old friends. As much as I make friends easily, there are people that, you meet and surface, that you're bound acquaintances. But my childhood friends, those are they're my best friends that, my best friend from childhood is still my best friend. Even though he's not here, he's somewhere else, he's in another country, but he's still my best friend, right? And many of my close friends like that. So fortunately, this guy is here. He's in America, and but it's funny. We were having a conversation, and it turns out he knew a guy from childhood as well, very close. This guy, his bio, his profile, his resume was outstanding. A Nigerian guy, and I felt he went to my school. He apparently was kicked out of my school before I arrived. And at the time I got into my law school, there was all this negative press about him. It was all over the papers. This guy was very brilliant. He graduated. He went to MIT, graduated from Harvard, and then he, came to my law school, but he got kicked out. And there was all this. He had this notorious, infamous character and everything. But eventually, he ends up in jail. They charge him for mortgage fraud, and initially there were 21 counts or whatever, and he was convicted for mortgage fraud um, and tax evasion. Right when prior to my wrongful, trumped up charges that I've been facing in my home, even though I was a victim of assault, right, in my own home, and then the police fabricated what happened, fabricated evidence, fabricated, um, people, witnesses things that never happened. And I'm seeing the judges, Judge James Bonifant, committing fraud on the court in order to suppress evidence, to have the evidence destroyed, prevent me from obtaining evidence, abusing the legal process, right? Prior to my experience, if I knew somebody was charged with something or then gone to jail, I wouldn't question. I wouldn't think that, well, maybe the system framed them, the system was bad, was corrupt. I'd think, well, no, they did it. They're guilty. That the system doesn't target people. I just don't, you know, I wouldn't say that. Of course, my life in Nigeria was sheltered. So you have to understand when I say I love America, because I came here, I wasn't, I came from as a foreigner. I'm an American citizen now. Of course, these days of ICE, you always have to say it. In fact, when I went to court the other time, I carried my passport with me that, okay, hey, whatever these people, maybe they've called, because I heard that ICE goes to courts and everything. If although they know I'm a citizen because they stole my certificate of naturalization, my US passport ID, my social security card, they stole things from my inside my house and they denied it, which is a felony, right? But they've denied taking these things again, which shows you that it was actually a xenophobic hate crime by Montgomery County Police and whoever the accomplices were. So I take my passport around, right, um with me, these days. But let me go back to what I was saying. So prior to my situation, I just wouldn't question that. I wouldn't question that somebody charged with a crime or gone to jail or whatever, been convicted, that they might have been innocent. I've written articles, stories in the past about reversed wrongful convictions, but I thought that was like one in a gazillion. That's an outlier, not the norm. And that's why I wrote about these things. I didn't expect that, okay, yeah, this is actually a pattern. It's actually frequent. It's normalized among certain marginalized communities. And when I came from Nigeria, I was sheltered, and I came to America. Again, my purpose was to get an American education. In fact, again, my first week, my father wanted me to come back. Right? My parents gave me money to come to America and get my education. They paid for my school, right? Initially, but I got more degrees than this, intended or sent me for. So, of course, I had to, you know, America gave me the opportunity to get these other things by exerting myself. So I loved America. Imagine the first place I went to school in Alabama, right? And it was a predominantly white school. Most of my classes, I was the only person. I had to invite my childhood friend to come and join me because he was coming to school in America as well. His brother, my best friend, schooled in England, but he wanted to come. I was like, "Oh, come to my school," because I was like the only one in a lot of my classes, and at least I have somebody, you know. And it wasn't like because I was focused on what I was doing, and when I see what's going on these days, I don't want to digress. And I'm seeing things that's so difficult for international students. When I went to my school that I went to, um, Troy, Alabama, they were very, very nice to internationals. They were nice to me. They're so nice to me that I remember my friends, Asian friends, international students used to say, "Hey, why is this the MBA director? His name was Dr. Ingram. Why was he so nice to me? Is he my dad? Well, that's a white guy." And I was very fortunate. My professor was a white guy that people used to call a racist. When I had to do an internship, he picked up the phone and called the company I went to go and do an internship for. And because I went to ask him if he could give me a letter of recommendation for internship. He said, "Oh, don't worry." He was like, "No, okay, yeah, that's no problem." So I was like, "Okay, let me give you his address." He said, "No, he'll look it up in the phone book." I remember oh, so I was like, I was like, "When should I come for the letter?" I said, "Don't worry about it. He's just going to call him on the phone." And that's how I got the job. And I did that job till I graduated, among other jobs, right? So I was very fortunate. I was very fortunate. So of course I always say I love America because from that I just kept going. I kept going, getting all the degrees. And I became a citizen eventually, right? And I didn't see this harms that I'm experiencing now that I'm a citizen. I'm a lawyer. Again, lawyer is different from attorney. I'm a lawyer, not an attorney, because I'm not licensed to practice law. All I have to do is take the bar, which this has taught me I'm going to take the bar by God's grace and practice. So I was like, what's I hadn't experienced this before, and I saw the welcoming, the hospitable part of America. Whether it was Alabama, lived in Alabama. Whether it was Massachusetts, whether it was New York, I've lived in all these places. It was hospitable to me. So now that I'm experiencing these things, and I'm just shocked. Americans fight for their place, though. They fight for their nation, and it makes me now realize again what are the struggles other people would have gone through, maybe black people, other marginalized groups, and they fought a lot to change the laws, you know. And back to that guy that I was talking about that was in my school, and I read about him and heard they told me in school that he had been convicted by the Department of Justice for mortgage fraud and things like that. I didn't know him. I never met him, but he had become so notorious in my school at this ostensibly, kicked him out. But I now knew somebody who knew him. And this guy was now telling me just around the time, a few days or so before I was assaulted. And this guy had already done several years in jail, but my friend, one of my closest friends, in fact, he's been a strong support to me since this crisis. He's been one of those people. We talk. If I anytime I because this guy, the judge, they've locked me up on three different occasions now, trying to coerce me. Right? He tried to coerce me to take a plea bargain. I say no. He tried to coerce me to do evaluations. I was like, no, I'd say, no, it violates my constitutional rights. Protesting on principle, and my attorney said it, and he'd go and lock me up, do something illegal. Um, I'd call my friend, and my friend would be talking to me. He'd send me money, and they'd send me money. So I've been fortunate. The right people supporting you. Have good friends. One of my friends always told me I had good friends, and then the people that I'm buying acquaintances with, and I don't expect things from people, but you realize they're not your friends. They're just so. And I'd never spend a day thinking about which person is a bowing acquaintance and is not really my friend or she's not really my friend. They're just there around because they envy you or they hate you, waiting to see if you fall or whatever. I'm not one of those people who sits down and frets. I'm somebody who loves my company because you see, I read a lot, and so I don't have time to spend with everybody, right? But the people I spend time with, my very good friends, when I have time, right? I mean, we have a blast, and I don't have time for rubbish. So the right people have been there for me, the people that I've stayed with, because this judge took away my life, my liberty, everything, just my life. Because the police wanted to take my life, but just my liberty. They're taking my property. But my friends have been there. God allowed my friends to support me, and I've been very fortunate. And they've been strong. So there are people who run away again from an odious person, but my friends know my character. So this guy, he was talking to me, this friend that I've known since my teens, have been friends. He was telling me, that he knows this guy who had this notorious, infamous image in my school, my law school. I didn't meet him. It was before me, and apparently got kicked out, but he graduated from Harvard and MIT. And it was sad for me to see what a waste that why would the nation. I came to realize how easy it is for you to succeed in America and how easy it is for America to destroy you, right? It so this is a black guy to go to Harvard, to go to MIT, to graduate from these places. It's not an easy thing, right? If you do these things, that people much think in America they expect that you're going to write your ticket, but then to not end up in jail, and the system has no mercy on you. Very quick to destroy you. Jail. I've never been to prison, and by God's grace, I'll never go to prison. Where I've been to, like pre-trial, I haven't had a trial. I've been to detention, so it's called pre-trial detention. So there are more rules, it's safer and everything. But look, the people who go to prison and come out of prison, they're the same people that you're going to be seeing in detention centers. These detention centers, they are, because they're temporary. They're just holding you until your trial. If they think you're a flight risk or, or whatever, you know. So it's safer, it's cleaner. In fact, but at the same time, it's the same. The character of the people who go to end up in prison, you see them in detention centers, very violent people who've killed somebody. They before they go to prison, because it's after conviction that they go to prison. You be in detention center with them. When they've been convicted, then that's when they send them to prison. So it's not a place to be in. So you can imagine somebody who's worked hard, or their parents have invested so much in them, and they end up these in prison, being convicted of mortgage fraud. Yes, I'm not saying the system should treat people special, but the system should value its people, because people pay taxes. It's still people who, when America wants to go to war, it's individuals, it's American citizens, it's human beings who come out and fight war, shed their blood, make sacrifices for the nation. It's people who pay taxes for the nation, right? So well, this guy is now convicted, and my friend's telling me that look, he had 21 charges counts. He's dropped it down to five, and he was telling me that look, this was the conversation we were having. And he was telling me that look, he thinks this guy was framed, that he's not guilty, that he's been using his legal skills in prison fighting it, and was like, look, this guy was framed, that they framed him. And I can understand because I was a banker. I was another reason I was not so big on being in remaining in banking and and stuff like that because there are things that people do that people can do for and it's very easy. There's a lot of funny stuff that goes on in financial services and things like that. I remember I had a friend long time ago, over 20 years, and she was Asian. I remember she was the first, well, no, not the first, she was one of the first Korean friends that I really had. I've lost touch with her, but we're friends. We used to talk a lot then. And she was telling me, because I was a banker, and she was like, so she was looking, she had just graduated from College Park, and very good school, and she was looking for a job. And I thought, oh, this girl is it's very easy. If I could get a job in banking, and I was not a citizen then, I was not you know, I was like, okay, I'm sure anybody can get a job in banking. That why don't and they pay well, it's secure and everything. She was like, no, she doesn't want to work in banking. Her friends, people told her those jobs are very dangerous because they get set up, because it has to do with money. They're always monitoring them, and they can get framed, or they can, that's it's a very dangerous stuff. Anyway, I did leave that industry, but yes, there can be funny stuff that goes on. But you know, as a banker, it's a big one. If they were to charge people with mortgage, be charging people with mortgage fraud, that's the easiest thing that the federal government can charge people with in America. See, it's a reason because maybe your bankers, maybe people will encourage people to commit mortgage fraud because they want to make a sale, right? I'm not making any indictments or whatever, but hey, so you never know. So I don't know the details of what this guy did, but it's just ironic that that was a conversation me and this guy were having. So in fact, when I was subsequently locked up and I was able to call him, he laughed, but later on he cried. He would be crying. I'd hear him, he'd be crying because of because my my friend likes me, and I'm not the sort of person who will cry for whatever because and he was going through a lot because he knew this isn't me. The amount of time this judge has locked me up, 15 months. You know, he was trying to break my whatever. In fact, by the time I'd come back, the psychologists in prison, because there was a guy who got to like me, he was half Spanish, half black. And it was so before I went to, because when he was ordering, because the reason he was sending me was he was committing me that I should go and do a mental health evaluation to go and get treatment, right? And saying I was incompetent to send trial. The first time, because they have their psychologist in jail, and there was this black guy who grew to like, and he said it's because there was a class that they have in jail, and I decided, okay, let me just see what's going on, because I took it as a learning experience. All the psychologists, all of them, psychiatrists, they were like, "There's nothing wrong with you. That you don't know what this judge is talking about," because I'd never experienced it before, so I didn't know what was going to happen. So the guy was the first person who came to calm me down. He said, "Look," and he told the class there. He said, "It's pretty easy for him to know who there's something wrong with. He's always known." And he's like, "I'm the only person." And he was telling people, because people in jail, people if they have issues or anything, they'll say it. He said, "I'm the only person. He's never once seen me off that he'll say, hey, yeah, there's something wrong with this guy." Because so he has no idea what this judge is saying. So there was one day he came to have a conversation with me, and he said, because they want to make sure that people, jail is very whatever traumatizing experience. There are many people who are there for the first time, and so they know. There was a guy who committed suicide right while I was there, and he had a PhD. He worked at National Institutes of Health. There was a white guy. He one day just killed himself, hanged himself, right? And he'd been at the unit that he had just left the unit I was in, right? He had been very close to a cellmate I had, and and people were shocked. So it's a traumatizing. So they have these people who come and talk to you because they're people who are in jail for the first time. There was this Ethiopian guy that I met. He had been a bank executive, speaks like 5 languages, fluent in German, like polished. He's actually German. He was born in Germany. Just came here. He was going on tour. That's how he ended up here. Very when you see him, you know he's an executive. So his experience, the first day he locked him up. And he was it was a family issue. So a lot of people, especially like normal people, it's family stuff that it gets them in jail, and that's so sad. You shouldn't be calling cops on your family in America, especially if you're black, right? It can, look for other means to resolve it. If you have to leave them, if you think there's something wrong, because it can destroy their lives. Jails were created to destroy black lives in America, and once you put your family in jail in America's jails, especially black men, are no. Those judges in Montgomery County, they're racist judges. In fact, it turned out that we had the same judge, and that Judge Bonifant is so racist. It's like when he sees an intelligent, successful black person, he wants to destroy you. He wants to break you. That was exactly what the Spanish psychologist, he's half Spanish, half black, that's what he was saying of me. He said, look, when he saw me, the judge has sent me back again. The third time, he said, this guy is trying to break you, right? So this other black guy that I saw, his first time, who was Ethiopian, clean cut everything. He had a nice house, mansion, everything, successful. Like he was in his suit. Like when they first held him, he was saying, "I want to speak to your manager." I want to speak to you because he still couldn't believe it because he was an executive, right? Bank executive. He couldn't believe. He was still saying, "I want to speak with your boss." That because like when they locked him up, it was like, "Are you guys kidding me?" They're locking him and everything, and it was from a family issue. And you see some people in your family that are jealous. If you see what they did to this guy while he was locked up, his family was now had a spat with him and with his wife, and I'm not going to put people's business out there. And it was just a little thing, and they called the cops. His in-law called the cops on him, and they now lied. They lied. They framed Ethiopia. They lied on him that this guy wanted to shoot. That he had a gun. He's one of those guys that owns a gun, and they just fabricated stuff on him. Eventually, it was his own wife that was begging and crying, because this guy was locked up for like 6 months. Over 6 months, he was locked up for a long time. Well, and he just adjusted to jail. Everybody, I'll do it, whatever, and talk about the experience in jail. So the people that have been there, they treat you. I mean, those inmates that are used to people coming from prison. There's a guy who tried to escape several times. He would have arranged and gotten my newspapers, right? You just slip it under the door. Any newspaper, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, just get see because they knew I liked reading, and he would always beg me to come and eat with them. I never did. I always ate it myself, and he would beg me I should come and say, no. I made it a point that okay, I'm here. I'm going to use my time well. So I read, and I read 100 books, important books. No. I don't waste my time. That's. I interviewed people who tried to find out, but I didn't want to. You don't want to become institutionalized. And this guy was always with them, fraternized with them. He went out for rec, did all of those things. I was not interested in any of those things, right? Because I'm not going to let anybody waste my time, my life, which is what James Bonifant was trying to do. Waste my time, waste my life. And it was this same judge. It's a little whatever. You can say, go and do community service, whatever. And he's harsh. He locked this guy up. While he was in jail, his family's wife was now trying to extort from him. That's actually illegal, blackmail. That okay, for that there won't be witnesses, blah blah blah. They'll let it go away if he signs over his house to the family. Can you imagine? He was telling me these things. Family. My case as well. It was a man saying he was my uncle, Jide that sent cops to my home, who had assaulted me. Ironically, with an Ethiopian as well. So maybe this Ethiopian was the one who gave him the idea of how to do it. I still don't know. And I've been asking for an investigation. I'm eager to have my day in court to find out what really happened. Why did cops come to my home based on a lie by Jide Warere, which is disavowed? Well, he is crazy, but they haven't gone to give him his medication or put him in a psychiatric home that is dangerous and he can kill people, right? Instead, Judge Bonifant is trying to protect the cops who injured me, saying, I'm lucky to be alive, that the cops could have killed me. Yes, I'm supposed to be alive because I was in my home not committing a crime. I was not fighting in my home. Nobody accused me. Like the Ethiopian guy that I talked about, he was living with his wife. Him and his wife were in a fight. They say, apparently that's what they said, right? And so they had an issue. I lived alone. No wahala. No wahala. Jide Lawari was not living in my home. How did he... Anyway, so it is so sad how the America's jails system, carceral system, is wasting black lives and wasting lives. It is so sad and so terrible. And so back to I keep digressing from my story about the well, that's how stories are interesting. Stories you should be able to, if stories are too linear, enough fun. You go a little bit to the side, go a little bit to the whatever, and then to come back again and tell the whole story. You should have these sweet frills added. But the guy, my very close friend, was telling me just a few days that he thinks they framed, and that's what the guy's been saying, and he's been fighting it. That the guy his friend who graduated from MIT, Harvard, that he was being framed with that mortgage fraud thing. That they set him up, they framed him, they did all these things. That he's been fighting it. That a lot of the charges were overturned, were vacated, many things, and he's been fighting it. And I don't know. And my experience, where I have filed false charges and the state is trying to defame me with these trumped up charges that they know has no merit. The public defender has said it. Every attorney that said it, they've seen evidence, they've said it. But the judge did not dismiss the case. He's played with the case because he's really trying to protect the cops, but he doesn't care that this guy's life is being affected. It pains me. I can't see my mom. My mom's going through trauma at this age, at 85, and this judge is so callous. And sometimes when people suffer things later on, like illness or these they don't think, I believe in God, right? And that's why I'm very careful. I've never sat down to plot evil to harm another person. God forbid. I don't do that. I believe in God. Now, those people who do evil like Bonifant, George James Bonifant, you realize there might really be this Satan, this devil, and people who work for him. Because I don't know how anybody can have a conscience and believe in God and not believe in, retribution, that God is going to repay evil for evil, and maybe, just things that happen to them later on just because of their bad actions. So I'm very careful. I don't do harm to people. I don't go about trying to harm people. I think it's God that determines everything that we go through. Even as I'm going through this, I'm going to keep my integrity. I don't let them to defeat my spirit. And I ask God, I rely on God. It's God who will vindicate me, right? No man has more power than God. Everybody's going to have his day. Right? Everybody's going to have his day that he's going to go. And everyone that one's maker will call them back, right? And they will account for their deeds, right? So there's no judge, there's no president that's too powerful, that's more powerful than the creator of the universe and Almighty God, right? So I don't tend to fear or cower for any individual because there's God who made them. They too, like all people, they'll go. Right? One day I'll go, I don't want to be morbid or anything, but that's just, there's no need to kowtow to people. Fear God. That's all I fear. I fear only the Almighty God. And, if you do evil, God, the Almighty God, will repay you with evil. If you do good, God will repay you with good, you and your descendants, right? It's saying in the Bible that, I've been young, I've been old, but I've never seen, the righteous man forsaken nor his descendants beg bread. Yeah, I'm a Christian like that, and that has helped me in my faith. But it's ironic that my friend was telling me that this guy was being framed by the government. It's just something I work for the federal government. I believe, in it. That's why I was, they don't pay you a bunch of money like the private sector, And look, I'm done here. If I wanted money, if money was my desire, I think I'd be in Nigeria, right? Because that's the best place to be doing business for in Nigeria, like me, who has connections, who knows how to get things done. That's where you can really, really make it. America, I don't think for certain people. Maybe America is a place for white people, and maybe other people. Or I don't think it's the best place for black people, unless you're an athlete, right? If you're an athlete, athletically inclined, then it's the best place, right? But for someone like me, I just felt it has the most advanced, the best government I could work for, and I kind of that was sort of what I cherished, right? It's rather bizarre that, okay, I'm going through this now, and I'm seeing a pattern, right? If I'm going through this and I'm legally trained, right? I have a law degree, I have a clean record, and there's actually a judge, corrupt state attorney, corrupt cops trying to damage it. There's no way, there are all these mechanisms, means, procedures to seek redress, to make sure, okay, there's no judicial misconduct, there's no police misconduct, but all of those things are tainted, like they're compromised. It's like they're just nominal. They don't do what they're supposed to do. They're just nominal. And I just found it from the system. Who haven't I reported to? The Department of Justice, FBI. How many times have I talked to the FBI? The DOJ. They'll just send it back to the same people I accused the police department that they should investigate first if they need the help. And they have this racket, it's called Internal Affairs Division amongst them. And they'll say, oh, after a cursory, not just a cursory investigation, not deep. So they didn't, maybe they just said, ask them, did you do what they said you should do? And the officer will say, no, it didn't. And I say, oh, no, they haven't done anything investigating. Say, there's no police, there's no violation of procedure, that the person followed police procedure. So it's token, it's nominal, no investigation. So the system doesn't work the way it's supposed to. I don't know. I guess that's a discussion for another time. I want to stop this video here now. And yeah, I've been talking about the judicial misconduct, fraud upon the court by Judge James Bonifant in the malicious prosecution I've been experiencing in Montgomery County, Maryland, pivoting on subordination of perjury and fraud on the courts, in violation of 18 USC Section 241 and 242 and 42 USC Section 1983. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.